While the playstyle of the game is similar, many core mechanics of BlazBlue have been changed with the new version, Continuum Shift. In this video, we'll talk about some of the most prominent ones, as well as explain what they might mean to you as a player. This guide is intended for intermediate to advanced level players who have already played BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, as many of the terms and concepts that are explained in this video are a little advanced for a beginner. So make sure you brush up on the basics before trying to make sense of this guide. On the flip side, if you've already played or are familiar with the arcade version of the game, you'll likely consider this to be a review. In BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, there was a guard system called the Guard Libra. Attacks dealt guard damage when blocked and would push the Libra farther out of equilibrium, and, if it maxed in a single direction, a guard crush occurred. This system is no longer present in BlazBlue Continuum Shift and has been replaced with the guard primer system. This gauge indicates how many guard primers your character currently has. Each character begins a round with a set number of guard primers. How many you begin with is determined by which character you are playing. For example, Hazama has 4, Hakumen has 6, and Tager has 10. There are two ways that a guard primer gauge can be depleted. Whenever a player blocks certain attacks, that player will temporarily lose guard primers, depending on what kind of attack it was. Most attacks, like Ragnar's Dead Spike, will temporarily only remove 1 when blocked. However, there are some other attacks, like Lambda's Calamity Sword, that can remove 2 primers when blocked. Each character has different attacks that remove guard primers. Experiment to find out which of these attacks work best for you. The second way that guard primers can be lost is to perform a defensive burst. A defensive burst, which is a burst that is being used while blocking or being hit, will remove half of your maximum guard primers for the remainder of the round. If a player runs out of guard primers, a guard crush occurs. When this happens, your opponent will be frozen in place, giving you the opportunity to attack. A ground guard crush works exactly the same way as it did in BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, with your opponent frozen in place on the ground. However, an air guard crush is slightly different. Your opponent will be wall slammed instead of being frozen mid-air. It is possible to prevent a guard crush by using the barrier guard. However, it will only prevent the final primer from being taken away. Also, if you block an attack that would have guard crushed you with the barrier guard, it will greatly deplete your remaining barrier. If you end up in the danger state because of this, you'll be in big trouble because you won't be able to stop the guard crush from occurring, and you'll take extra damage when the guard crush does occur. After being guard crushed, that player's guard primers will be restored. As for recovering guard primers outside of being guard crushed, guard primers will slowly regenerate depending on what state of combat you're in. If a guard primer is about to recover, it will start to flash. But note, that guard primer has not fully returned yet. If you lose another primer while it is flashing, that guard primer won't be restored and you'll lose any progress you had in recovering that guard primer. Though they serve the same function, bursts have greatly changed in BlazBlue Continuum Shift. So let's talk a little bit about how the burst system has changed. In the previous game, each player had one burst, denoted by this icon. In BlazBlue Continuum Shift, each player starts with a single burst at the beginning of a match, and will gain one burst if they lose a round. This is denoted by the burst icons here. The gray icon represents a burst that you have yet to gain, and the colored icon represents a burst that you have. Seeing that there is only one gray icon, that means that you can only gain one additional burst throughout the match. This is the same whether it's first to 2 or first to 5. On a side note, if there is a double down or a draw, neither player will gain a burst. This doesn't happen too often, but it's best not to get caught off guard by it. There are a few changes in how the burst functions in BlazBlue Continuum Shift. First of all, there are no longer burst qualities which denote how quickly the burst came out. In BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, if you had less barrier when you activated your burst would come out slower and would change color. Another change is that prior to your burst coming out, there is no longer a brief period where your character will auto-guard attacks. Instead, your burst will just come out and you'll be invincible to all attacks, so they'll pass right through you. The burst in BlazBlue Continuum Shift does not consume all of your barrier for the round, and barrier is not required to burst. This is a big improvement to burst, considering that losing all of your barrier will put you in the danger state and cause you to take extra damage. Not only that, if you don't have any barrier, you won't be able to barrier guard for the rest of the round either. As previously noted, if you use a burst while blocking or being hit, you will lose half of your maximum guard primers for the rest of the round. This is the only real drawback to defensive bursts. and other than that, they pretty much function the same way. They're a great way to avoid taking lethal damage, or to regain momentum while your opponent is hitting you. Offensive bursts, on the other hand, have changed a great deal from Calamity Trigger. In Calamity Trigger, if you blocked an offensive burst, it would cause a great deal of guard damage. In fact, it often caused a guard crush if it was blocked. And on top of that, if you tried to use the barrier guard to stop the guard crush, you could lose your entire barrier. With the changes to the guard system in BlazBlue Continuum Shift, this can no longer occur, as bursts no longer deal any guard damage whatsoever. Another difference to offensive bursts is what happens when your burst hits your opponent. In BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, if an offensive burst hit you, it would just blow you away. However, in BlazBlue Continuum Shift, if an offensive burst hits you, it will send you flying upwards, allowing your opponent to combo you. While the burst itself deals no damage, the follow-up combo does do damage, and the follow-up combo can actually kill you. So this makes an offensive burst a very legitimate weapon for attacking. The conditions for performing an Astral Heat have changed since Calamity Trigger. Now there are 4 different conditions that you must fulfill in order to perform an Astral Heat. 1. You must be at match point, so you only need 1 more win to win the match. 2. You are at 100% heat. 3. You have 1 burst icon to spend. 4. Your opponent's health is below 35%. When all of the conditions are met, your character's portrait will begin to shine. It's worth mentioning that you cannot perform the Astral Heat in a combo if that combo reduces your opponent's health below 35% for the first time. In other words, if your opponent is above 35% at the beginning of your combo, you won't be able to perform the Astral Heat in the middle of the same combo. However, this is not true for the heat condition, so you can start below 100% and build to 100% in the middle of the combo, then finish it with an Astral Heat. Once again, just make sure to look at your character portrait. If you do, you'll always know whether or not you can perform your Astral Heat. In BlazBlue, there are many attacks that cannot be normal blocked in the air. If you try to normal block these types of attacks, a blue exclamation mark will appear, and then you'll get hit regardless. For BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, you could use either a barrier or instant block to block these types of attacks. However, in BlazBlue Continuum Shift, you can only use the barrier block to block these types of attacks. Therefore, it's best to have your barrier guard ready if you're anticipating your opponent's anti-air attack.